Picture this scenario unfolding in a way that grips you from the start, where you're standing amid a crowd of relatives who have spent years glancing past you with judgments etched into their every casual comment, dismissing the scars and triumphs that shaped your life. And then in a single, deliberate moment of defiance, you choose to step forward not with anger, but with the quiet power of your own unapologetic truth, transforming the entire atmosphere into one of stunned realization that lingers long after the echoes fade, leaving everyone to confront the stories they thought they knew so well. But that was merely the culmination of a deeper family saga at my sister Lisa's wedding. One that began with a simple text message and unraveled into revelations I never anticipated. My name is Emily Harper, and at the age of 42, having navigated the rough terrains of a 12-year stint in the Army that took me from the sun-baked streets of Savannah to the relentless dust storms of deployments in Iraq and beyond, I have come to understand that family events like weddings often serve as battlegrounds for old resentments, places where superficial smiles mask the undercurrents of favoritism and unspoken betrayals that have simmered for decades, much like the humid Georgia evenings that cling to your skin and refuse to let go even as night falls. Lisa, my younger sister by a full 5 years, had always positioned herself as the polished gem of our family, the one who glided through a prestigious college program and secured a high-flying marketing position in the bustling heart of Atlanta, where she curated an image of effortless success through carefully staged social media posts that showcased her designer handbags, weekend getaways to coastal resorts, and now this impending marriage to Brad, a steady accountant with a firm handshake, and a penchant for recounting stock market trends at dinner parties, all of which contrasted sharply with my own path marked by the structured discipline of military life, the weight of command decisions that saved lives but left invisible wounds, and the practical realities of raising my 12-year-old son Jake as a single mother after my divorce from Tom 3 years earlier. A split that was amicable on paper but left lingering questions about trust and shared histories. The invitation to the wedding arrived in an elaborate gold-embossed envelope that screamed extravagance, complete with embossed maps to the venue just outside Atlanta. A sprawling estate with manicured gardens and ballrooms that evoked the grandeur of old Southern traditions, yet as I held it in my modest kitchen back in Savannah, surrounded by the familiar clutter of Jake's school projects and the faint scent of last night's takeout, I felt a familiar twinge of exclusion, knowing full well that this event would amplify the divides that had always existed between us, with our mother Margaret playing her role as the enabler who doted on Lisa's every whim while viewing my independence as a mild inconvenience rather than a source of pride. 2 weeks before the big day, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa that cut straight to the heart of her insecurities, reading simply, "Hey Em, so excited you're coming, but just a heads up, no white dress, okay? You wearing something like that would totally embarrass me and steal the spotlight, and I need this day to be perfect." A comment that landed like a poorly aimed grenade, stirring up memories of past slights such as the time in our 20s when she mocked my buzzed haircut from basic training as unfeminine during a family barbecue, or how she once dismissed my deployment stories over holiday dinners by changing the subject to her latest promotion, all while Margaret nodded along with sympathetic smiles that never quite reached her eyes, reinforcing the narrative that Lisa's path was the one worthy of celebration while mine remained the backdrop, the tough but unglamorous support act in a family drama scripted long ago by loss and longing after our father's sudden passing from a heart attack when I was just 17. Leaving behind a void filled with unequal shares of inheritance and affection that I had learned to navigate with the same stoic resolve that carried me through patrols under fire. In response, I typed back a measured, understood, "I'll keep it simple," accompanied by a neutral emoji to diffuse any tension. But as I set the phone down and stared out at the oak-lined street where neighborhood kids rode bikes in lazy circles, a slow-building resolve took root. One that whispered of alternatives to passive compliance, perhaps drawing on the uniform still stored in my closet, its fabric pressed and waiting like a dormant ally from those years of service that taught me the value of timing and presence over overt confrontation. Driving north from Savannah toward the hotel near the venue, the interstate hummed beneath my tires while the late afternoon sun filtered through Spanish moss-draped trees, casting dappled shadows that mirrored the flickering doubts in my mind about whether attending at all was wise, given the history of these gatherings where I often ended up on the periphery. Fielding polite inquiries about my post-military adventures, that thinly veiled curiosity about why I hadn't settled into something more conventional like Lisa's corporate ladder climb, yet something compelled me forward, perhaps the pull of witnessing Jake's and find her version of happiness, or the nagging sense that this could be an opportunity to rewrite a small piece of our shared narrative without descending into the chaos of outright argument. Checking into the bland but functional hotel room with its generic artwork and the distant murmur of elevators, I unpacked methodically, laying out a safe ensemble of dark slacks and a simple blouse that would blend into the crowd of upscale guests likely adorned in pastels and heirloom jewelry, but at the bottom of my suitcase lay the dress uniform, complete with its array of ribbons denoting commendations for leadership under duress and the silver bars from my time as a sergeant. Items I rarely displayed except at veterans events, where the weight of shared experiences fostered genuine connections rather than the performative ones of family obligations. Running my fingers over the crisp wool, I imagined the reactions if I chose to wear it, not as a deliberate act of sabotage, but as an authentic representation of the life that had forged my resilience. The one that funded Jake's braces and my modest home through veteran benefits and odd jobs in logistics, a life Lisa viewed with a mix of awe and disdain, often joking in group chats about how my soldier stories were too intense for her light-hearted brunches with friends from the ad agency. The rehearsal dinner loomed the next evening, a prelude to the main event where toasts would flow and alliances would subtly shift, and as I hung the uniform in the closet, its presence felt like a secret weapon, one that could either mend fences or ignite long-buried conflicts depending on how the winds of family dynamics blew. Just as I settled onto the bed with a lukewarm cup of hotel coffee, my phone vibrated again, this time with a call from an unfamiliar number that turned out to be Tom, his voice carrying that familiar baritone laced with hesitation from our shared past, saying, "Emily, it's me. Listen, I know this is out of the blue, but I'm in town for the wedding, and there's something Lisa's keeping under wraps that could change everything if it comes out during the ceremony, so we need to talk before it's too late," leaving me with a pounding heart and a cliffhanger of intrigue that made the room suddenly feel smaller, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to hear what secrets might finally surface amid the vows and celebrations. Tom's unexpected call lingered in my mind like the faint echo of artillery fire from deployments long past, stirring a mix of curiosity and caution as I lay awake that night in the hotel room, the air conditioner humming softly against the Georgia heat while questions about what Lisa might be concealing swirled through my thoughts, compelling me to wonder if this wedding, meant to celebrate unity, would instead unearth the fractures that had defined our family dynamics for years, especially given the history of secrets that seemed to multiply after Dad's death, leaving me to piece together truths from fragmented conversations and unspoken glances that carried more weight than any formal confession ever could. By morning, I had resolved to proceed with the rehearsal dinner as planned, dressing in my understated black ensemble that blended seamlessly with the crowd's expectations, yet carrying the envelope from Tom tucked securely in my purse, its contents a potential key to unlocking the resentments that had built up over time, much like the slow accumulation of sand in desert boots that eventually grinds against your every step until you shake it out or let it wear you down. The venue for the rehearsal unfolded across a meticulously landscaped garden estate where string lights draped from ancient oaks like delicate veils, casting a warm glow over clusters of guests arriving in luxury sedans. Their conversations laced with references to golf outings and investment portfolios that highlighted the socio-economic chasm between Lisa's urban circle and the more grounded roots I had maintained in Savannah, where community meant neighborhood barbecues rather than black tie fundraisers, and as I navigated the gravel paths toward the main tent, I felt the familiar isolation of being the outlier, the veteran sister whose stories of overseas service often elicited polite nods rather than genuine engagement, a pattern that had only intensified since my return to civilian life. and the subsequent divorce that left me navigating single parenthood with a pragmatism forged in the field. Spotting Margaret first amid the arriving throng, her silver-streaked hair elegantly coiffed and her outfit a testament to boutique shopping sprees funded by Lisa's successes, I approached with a measured greeting that masked the undercurrent of tension. Her embrace brief and perfunctory as she immediately turned to fuss over Lisa, who emerged from a side entrance in a flowing rehearsal gown of pale blue silk that accentuated her figure and drew admiring coos from the bridesmaids, a group of polished professionals from her marketing firm who chatted animatedly about destination honeymoons and career milestones, their laughter ringing out in a way that underscored how effortlessly Lisa fit into this world of aspirations and appearances. While I stood slightly apart, exchanging pleasantries with a distant uncle who inquired about Jake's school activities before veering into safe topics like the weather, avoiding the deeper inquiries that might touch on my military past or the reasons behind my split from Tom. Brad, Lisa's fiancé, greeted me with his characteristic salesman charm, clapping me on the shoulder a bit too heartily and launching into a monologue about the stock market's recent upticks, his enthusiasm for numbers contrasting with the emotional undercurrents I sensed bubbling beneath the surface, particularly as Lisa sidled up during a lull in the greetings, her smile tight and her voice pitched low to say, Thanks for toning it down on the outfit. Last thing I need is you drawing eyes away from the real focus tomorrow," a remark that landed with the subtlety of a directive from a superior officer, reminding me of her long-standing habit of positioning herself as the central figure in our family's narrative, one where my contributions were acknowledged but never elevated, much like how during our childhood she commandeered the spotlight at holiday gatherings with tales of her school achievements, while I quietly handled the chores that kept the household running after Dad's passing. As the group moved into the tent for the rehearsal walkthrough, the officiant guiding the processional with efficient gestures that mimicked the solemnity of the upcoming ceremony, I found myself positioned at the rear of the bridal party. A symbolic placement that mirrored my role in the family pecking order, and it was during this orchestrated march down the flower-lined aisle that Tom's presence registered fully, his tall frame appearing at the edge of the seating area where guests would sit. Dressed in a crisp button-down that did little to hide the extra weight from years of desk work in real estate, his eyes meeting mine with a mix of familiarity and unease that transported me back to our early days of marriage when we bonded over shared dreams of stability before the realities of deployments and financial strains pulled us apart, yet his unexpected attendance here raised immediate questions about his motives, especially after that cryptic phone call hinting at Lisa's hidden agenda. The rehearsal concluded without incident, transitioning smoothly into the dinner portion where long tables groaned under platters of grilled salmon, fresh salads dotted with artisanal cheeses, and bottles of Chardonnay flowing freely to lubricate the toasts that would follow. And as I took my seat among second cousins who reminisced about family reunions from the 90s, complete with slideshows of beach vacations and birthday parties that evoked a nostalgic warmth tinged with the ache of exclusion for those like me who had been absent due to service commitments, the atmosphere thickened when Margaret rose for her speech, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion as she painted Lisa as the resilient heart of the family, the one who had overcome adolescent insecurities to bloom into a confident professional, conveniently glossing over the privileges that had paved her way while implying that my path had been a detour rather than a deliberate choice, a narrative that ignited a spark of indignation within me, prompting me to wait for my turn amid the applause before standing with glass in hand to deliver a toast of my own, saying in a voice steady and laced with subtle irony, to Lisa and Brad, "May your union be as enduring and unblemished as the stories Lisa tells about our shared past, like that time she so generously borrowed from my college savings for her senior trip without a second thought to the consequences, proving that family support flows in mysterious ways." A pointed reference to an incident from our early 20s when she had dipped into funds I had scrimped for during my first enlistment, using them for a lavish European jaunt while I redeployed for another tour. And the words hung in the air, causing a ripple of uncomfortable laughter from some and sharp intakes of breath from others, Lisa's cheeks flushing a deep crimson that clashed with her gown as Margaret's glare pierced through the candlelight, marking this as my first calculated retaliation. Not born of malice, but of a desire to pierce the veneer of perfection with a sliver of reality that left the table in a hush broken only by the clink of silverware resuming its nervous rhythm. Seeking a moment of respite from the charged atmosphere, I excused myself to the garden periphery where the night air carried the scent of blooming jasmine and distant barbecue smoke from a nearby event, allowing the cool breeze to temper the heat of confrontation. But Tom followed shortly after, his footsteps crunching on the path as he drew close to murmur, "That was gutsy, Emily. But you only scratched the surface. Lisa's secret involves more than money. It's tied to Dad's estate in ways that could upend everything if exposed at the wrong moment," his words accompanied by the handover of a small, yellowed envelope sealed with faded tape. Its inscription in Dad's handwriting reading, "For Emily alone," a discovery that sent a jolt through me reminiscent of incoming fire alerts, prompting memories of his quiet encouragement during my high school years when he spoke of leaving me a portion of the family land plot as a foundation for whatever future I chose. A promise that seemed to evaporate after his death amid the chaos of probate and Margaret's decisions that favored Lisa's immediate needs. Before I could press him for details, voices carried from the tent on the wind, Lisa's tone edged with frustration as she confided in Brad, "She can't possibly know about the letter. Not yet, or it'll ruin the whole day and drag up things best left buried." Her words slicing through the night like a revelation half revealed, freezing me in place behind a cluster of azaleas as their footsteps approached the garden path, hearts pounding in unison with the uncertainty of what confrontation might erupt if they discovered me there, eavesdropping on the fragile web of deceptions that threatened to ensnare us all. Eavesdropping on Lisa's frantic whispers in the garden shadows that night left me frozen amid the azaleas. My breath shallow as Brad's reassuring murmurs blended with her insistence that the letter must remain concealed to preserve the facade of their perfect union. A revelation that deepened the chasm of betrayal already widening within me and forced me to confront the possibility that the wedding's joyous veneer masked not just personal slights, but a calculated erasure of my rightful place in our family's legacy, all while the distant hum of the dinner crowd inside the tent served as a stark reminder of how easily truths could be buried under layers of celebration and denial that had defined our interactions since Dad's untimely death. Slipping away unnoticed before they rounded the path, I retreated to my hotel room where sleep evaded me entirely, the envelope's weight pressing against my nightstand like an unexploded ordnance waiting for the right moment to detonate. Its contents, once I mustered the courage to open it under the harsh fluorescent light, revealing Dad's heartfelt note from years ago, penned in his steady hand during a hospital visit before his heart gave out, expressing his pride in my enlistment dreams and his intention to bequeath me the small plot of family land on the outskirts of Savannah as a tangible foundation for the independence he knew I would forge, a gesture that acknowledged the sacrifices I would make in service while subtly critiquing Margaret's tendency to favor Lisa's more conventional ambitions, words that now carried the sting of confirmation that this inheritance had been diverted without my knowledge, likely funneled into Lisa's early career ventures or the very grandeur of this wedding itself, leaving me to wrestle with the dilemma of whether to voice this injustice amid the festivities or let it fester until a more opportune strike could be made. Morning broke with the insistent chirp of my alarm, pulling me into the wedding day's frenetic rhythm where bridal preparations unfolded in the hotel suite reserved for the women. A space alive with the chatter of bridesmaids applying makeup in front of mirrored vanities and the clink of mimosa glasses toasting to Lisa's impending vows. Yet as I entered carrying a modest bouquet of wildflowers I'd picked up from a roadside stand to symbolize my grounded roots, the atmosphere shifted subtly with Lisa's appraising glance over her shoulder while she stood before a full-length mirror in her flowing ivory gown that cascaded like a waterfall of silk and lace, its design evoking the bridal magazines she had pored over during planning sessions that excluded my input. Her comment delivered with feigned casualness amid the flurry of pearl necklaces being fastened, You stuck with the basics again. Good call, though I bet the uniform temptation was strong after last night's little toast. Just remember, today is about harmony, not history lessons that make everyone uncomfortable. A barb wrapped in sisterly concern that ignited the familiar spark of resentment, reminding me of countless instances where she had undermined my choices, from dismissing my decision to enlist as a rebellious phase during our teens to more recent eye rolls at family dinners when I shared anecdotes about leading patrols through hostile territories, all while Margaret hovered nearby adjusting the veil with maternal adoration, her silence on the matter speaking volumes about her complicity in perpetuating the narrative that Lisa's path deserved the spotlight, unmarred by my complications. Descending to the venue's main hall, where guests began arriving in waves of pressed suits and floral dresses that filled the air with perfumes reminiscent of spring garden parties from my childhood, I navigated the receiving area with a practiced smile, fielding greetings from aunts and uncles who recalled me as the tomboy who climbed trees rather than the decorated sergeant whose service had overlapped with national conflicts that dominated evening news cycles during the early 2000s. Their inquiries laced with a nostalgic curiosity that skirted the edges of my deployments without delving into the personal tolls like the nights spent writing letters home or the quiet grief over lost comrades that still surfaced in solitary moments. Yet it was Aunt Clara, ever the family archivist with her collection of photo albums spanning generations, who pulled me aside near a display of vintage family portraits, including one of Dad telling the very plot now in question, her voice dropping to a confidential hush as she confided, "Emily dear, I've always wondered about that land your father mentioned leaving you. Lisa came into some money around the time of her first big job, you know, and whispers suggest it came from selling off assets quietly to avoid family drama, all with Margaret's blessing to keep things smooth for the golden child," a disclosure that aligned chillingly with the letter's implications and painted a picture of systematic favoritism extending beyond emotional support into financial manipulations that had robbed me of stability during my post-service transition, when every dollar counted toward Jake's upbringing and rebuilding after the divorce. The intimate family luncheon that followed in a sunlit conservatory offered no respite, with Brad dominating the conversation through tales of their courtship involving spontaneous trips to Napa Valley wineries and insider tips on real estate flips that mirrored Tom's own field. His laughter booming as he proposed toasts to enduring partnerships while Tom sat across from me, his presence a complicating factor since his invitation had clearly been extended through Lisa's network rather than any lingering familial tie to me, his occasional glances conveying a silent alliance forged in the shared knowledge of the envelope's secrets, and when Margaret launched into her effusive recounting of Lisa's journey from insecure teen to empowered executive, emphasizing themes of sisterly bonds that weathered life's storms, I felt the moment ripe for another layer of retaliation, rising midway through the dessert course of lemon tarts and fresh berries to interject with measured poise. Indeed, bonds like the one where Lisa so thoughtfully managed Dad's heirlooms after his passing, such as pawning his cherished gold watch, the very one he wore during his factory shifts to support us all, under the guise of a temporary loan that somehow stretched into years, only resurfacing when I tracked it down myself last year through a Savannah pawnbroker who remembered the transaction all too well, producing the timepiece from my jacket pocket where it gleamed under the skylight, its inscription of Dad's initials catching the light in a way that drew collective gasps from the table, Lisa's fork clattering against her plate as her composure fractured into a mask of indignation, while Margaret stammered about youthful mistakes long forgiven, the revelation serving as my second calculated strike that exposed a thread of hypocrisy without derailing the schedule, its wit lying in the tangible proof that forced acknowledgement rather than mere accusation, leaving the air charged with the discomfort of truths half buried and the guests exchanging loaded looks that hinted at alliances shifting in real time. With the ceremony approaching like an inevitable tide, I withdrew to a quiet antechamber off the main hall, the muffled strains of prelude music filtering through the walls as I contemplated the uniform concealed in my overnight bag, its donning now feeling less like an impulse and more like an inevitable assertion of identity amid the growing storm of revelations. the fabric's texture under my fingertips evoking boot camp drills, and the camaraderie of units that valued merit over pedigree. A stark counterpoint to the familial politics playing out beyond the door. Yet, just as I began to unfasten the clasps, my phone vibrated with an urgent text from Tom that read, "Don't wait, confront her with the full letter now." The plot sale was forged, and Margaret co-signed, but Lisa's using wedding funds to cover traces. Act before vows seal the lie. A bombshell that thrust me into a vortex of moral quandary, heart racing as the bridesmaid's knock echoed insistently, summoning me back to the fray where the procession awaited, the precipice of exposure looming larger with every passing second, and the uncertainty of how far I would push for justice in a space designed for harmony hanging heavy in the balance. Tom's text about the forged sale of the family plot hit me like a sudden sandstorm obscuring the horizon during a routine patrol, blurring the lines between immediate action and strategic restraint as I stood in that antechamber with the bridesmaid's knock growing more insistent from the hallway, her voice calling out that the procession was lining up and everyone was waiting for the final family members to take their places, forcing me to shove the phone back into my pocket and hastily zip up the black dress I had laid out as a compromise, though the uniform's bag remained tantalizingly close by the door like a loaded rifle left at arm's reach. Its presence a silent promise of the bolder statement I might yet make if the mounting revelations demanded it, all while the weight of the letter in my other pocket served as a tangible anchor to the injustices that had compounded over years of silent acquiescence to family hierarchies that prioritized Lisa's shine over my substance. Emerging into the corridor where floral arrangements lined the walls in cascading profusion, their scents mingling with the underlying tension of anticipation, I joined the flow of participants moving toward the ceremony hall. The organ's prelude notes swelling through the double doors like a gathering wave ready to crash upon the assembled guests who filled the pews in a sea of pastel attire and murmured conversations that evoked the communal gatherings of my youth in Savannah churches where hymns and potlucks fostered a sense of belonging now overshadowed by the personal betrayals simmering beneath this event's surface. The hall itself was a vision of opulent simplicity with white-draped arches framing the altar and sunlight streaming through stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns across the aisle, illuminating faces I recognized from decades of shared holidays and milestones, aunts whispering about the bride's gown while uncles adjusted ties with nostalgic glances at old photos projected subtly on side screens. Yet as I took my seat toward the back amid the bridal party's entrance, the atmosphere thickened palpably when my uniform bag, left momentarily unattended in the rush, caught Lisa's eye from her vantage near the front, her head snapping around with a flash of alarm that she quickly masked behind a radiant smile for the photographer, but not before Margaret noticed and shot me a warning look from her reserved row, her posture rigid as if bracing for an ambush she had long feared in the fragile architecture of this day designed to cement Lisa's narrative of flawless progression. As the vows commenced with Brad's steady recitation of promises laced with references to building a future together amid life's uncertainties, drawing appreciative nods from the congregation who saw in them echoes of their own marital journeys through economic shifts and family relocations that defined middle-class American resilience, I felt the internal conflict escalate like a radio transmission cutting in and out during a critical mission, torn between the urge to rise and expose the forgery right there amid the sacred exchanges, or to bide my time for a revelation that carried more precision and less collateral damage to innocence like Jake, who deserved a mother who modeled composure over chaos. A dilemma that intensified when Tom, seated a few rows ahead, turned subtly to mouth the words, "Not yet," in a gesture that acknowledged our shared history of navigating crises, from the strains of my absences during deployments to the financial tightropes after his real estate ventures faltered. His caution a reminder that impulsive strikes often backfired in the intricate web of family loyalties, where one truth could unravel threads connecting generations. Midway through the exchange of rings, when the officiant paused for a reading from Corinthians about love enduring all things, a cousin seated beside me leaned in with feigned nonchalance, her voice a conspiratorial thread amid the solemnity. "Emily, That bag of yours looks official, planning a surprise entrance or just forgetting your civilian clothes. Either way, it's got people talking already, an opening that I seized with calculated candor. Replying loud enough for the surrounding pews to catch, surprise indeed, especially if Lisa shares how she surprised me by forging Dad's will to sell my inheritance plot, using the proceeds for her condo down payment, and even slipping some to cover Tom's bad investments post-divorce, all while Mom co-signed the deception to keep the family image intact, words that rippled outward like a stone skipped across a still pond, eliciting a cascade of turned heads and stifled gasps that disrupted the reading's flow without halting the ceremony entirely. The officiants glanced my way, registering mild confusion before continuing. But Lisa's pallor and the way her hand trembled on Brad's arm revealed the strike's precision, a witty escalation of revenge that leveraged public timing to force introspection rather than outright confrontation, leaving the air humming with the discomfort of half-formed questions from guests who now viewed the proceedings through a lens cracked by suspicion. As the recessional music swelled and the couple retreated up the aisle amid scattered applause tempered by the undercurrent of whispers, I lingered in my seat, allowing the crowd to filter out toward the cocktail reception on the adjoining lawn, where champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvre stations promised a veneer of festivity that barely concealed the brewing storm, and it was there amid the manicured hedges and bubbling fountains that Lisa cornered me near a cluster of hydrangeas, her gown trailing slightly in the grass as she hissed through clenched teeth, "What in the world was that stunt, Emily? You show up hinting at uniforms and now dropping bombs about the plot like it's some courtroom drama. This is my wedding, not your therapy session. And if you breathe one more word about that letter, I'll make sure everyone knows you're just bitter from your failed marriage and dead-end jobs," her venom laced with the insecurity that had always fueled her barbs. From teenage rivalries over Dad's attention to adult competitions where my veteran status became a punchline in her social circle's anecdotes. Yet before I could retort with the full weight of the evidence, Tom materialized from the crowd, his expression a blend of resolve and regret as he pulled me gently aside toward a quieter gazebo, confiding in a rush, "It's worse than the forgery. Lisa didn't just sell the plot. She used the funds to launch her marketing firm on the idea you pitched me years ago during one of our late-night talks after your return from deployment. The Veteran Support Network cafe that could have been your fresh start, and Margaret backed it to sideline you. Even looping me in with a loan I repaid quietly to avoid dragging Jake into the mess. But now with the wedding spotlight, she's desperate to bury it all." The twist landed with the force of a betrayal compounded, transforming my old business dream, sketched out on napkins during our marriage's hopeful phases, into the cornerstone of Lisa's empire, a revelation that thrust me into yet another ethical bind. Weighing the satisfaction of immediate exposure against the long-term fallout for our son who navigated weekends between parents already strained by history, all while the reception's laughter drifted over like a mocking counterpoint to the dilemmas churning within. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn where guests mingled oblivious to the undercurrents, Jake's innocent call came through on my phone, his excited voice asking about the big party, and whether Aunt Lisa's cake was as tall as he'd imagined from the photos, grounding me momentarily in the priorities beyond revenge. Yet just as I reassured him with tales of floral arches and string quartets, the maid of honor approached with a flushed urgency, thrusting my uniform bag into my hands and whispering, "Lisa saw this earlier and insists you change immediately before the dinner speeches. She's unraveling, Emily, and if you don't comply, she swears it'll end the day in disaster," her eyes pleading amid the growing conflict that now poised on the razor's edge of eruption, heart thundering as I clutched the bag and headed toward the powder room, the mirror's reflection capturing a woman at her breaking point where the choice between conformity and catharsis hung suspended, the impending dinner speeches looming as the final arena for truths that could either heal old wounds or inflict new ones in a family tapestry fraying at every seam. Clutching the uniform bag in the powder room's dim light as the maid of honor's plea echoed in my ears, I stared into the mirror where my reflection stared back with eyes hardened by years of deployments and domestic battles alike. weighing the final precipice between yielding to Lisa's demands for a seamless facade and embracing the authentic self that had carried me through sand-swept patrols and the solitary nights rebuilding life after divorce, a choice that now crystallized amid the distant clatter of reception plates and laughter filtering through the vents like a siren's call to normalcy. Yet deep down I knew that changing out of principle would only deepen the erasure of my story. The one Dad had championed in that hidden letter and that Lisa had systematically dismantled to prop up her empire of appearances. With hands steady from muscle memory honed in boot camp drills, I set the bag on the counter and began unfastening the black dress, letting it pool at my feet like shed skin from a life of compromises, then lifted the uniform from its protective folds, the wool's familiar weight settling over my shoulders as I buttoned the jacket with deliberate care. Each clasp securing not just fabric, but the fragments of pride earned in command tents under enemy fire and the quiet victories of raising Jake through financial pinches and emotional tempests. The medals pinning neatly to my chest with a soft click that resonated like a declaration in the tiled space, transforming me from peripheral sister into a figure of unyielding presence ready to intersect with the wedding's scripted joy in a way that demanded reckoning without descending into the vulgarity of raised voices or petty brawls. Stepping out into the corridor where twilight hues painted the walls in deepening amber from the setting sun, I felt the first stares from passing staff who paused mid-stride to acknowledge the uniform with respectful nods reminiscent of Veterans Hall gatherings back in Savannah, where shared badges bridged gaps wider than family feuds. And as I made my way to the grand ballroom for the dinner reception, the air thickened with the aromas of roasted prime rib and herb-infused sides wafting from serving stations. Guests already seated at round tables adorned with crystal glassware and centerpieces of white lilies that symbolized purity, but now struck me as ironic veils over the impurities of deceit that had surfaced throughout the day. The room fell into a hush as I entered, 200 pairs of eyes turning in unison from their pre-dinner chatter about honeymoon itineraries and career anecdotes to fix on me standing tall in the doorway. The uniform's crisp lines cutting a stark contrast to the sea of cocktail attire that evoked corporate mixers and suburban barbecues from my own past, Lisa's gaze locking onto mine from the head table where she sat flanked by Brad and Margaret, her expression cycling through shock, fury, and a flicker of dawning defeat that mirrored the priceless silence enveloping the space like a held breath before a storm. No words needed to convey the reversal of her earlier warning about white dresses and embarrassment. For here I stood not in bridal mimicry, but in the garb of service that commanded respect on its own terms, a silent victory that upended the hierarchy without a single shout, witty in its adherence to authenticity over artifice and satisfying in the way it forced the room to confront the overlooked veteran amid their celebrations of conventional milestones. Navigating to an empty seat near the periphery where sympathetic glances from distant relatives offered quiet solidarity, I settled amid the resumed murmurings that now carried undercurrents of speculation about the day's earlier whispers and my dramatic attire. The toasts proceeding with a subdued energy as Brad's best man recounted light-hearted tales of the couple's meeting at a networking event 5 years prior, his jokes about corporate ladders landing flatter than intended against the backdrop of unresolved tensions. Yet when Margaret rose for her maternal address, her voice wavering as she extolled Lisa's grace and the unbreakable sisterly bond forged through trials, I felt the moment's gravity pull me to my feet once more, glass in hand as I interjected smoothly into the pause, to unbreakable bonds indeed, like the one Dad envisioned when he wrote of leaving me the family plot as a testament to resilience. A gift Lisa and you, Mom, chose to forge away and redirect into ventures that built her success on foundations meant for my own fresh start after service, including the cafe idea I shared in confidence during harder times. Producing the letter from my pocket to hold aloft where its yellowed edges caught the chandelier light, eliciting a wave of indrawn breaths and widened eyes that amplified the silence into something profound. Lisa's hand flying to her mouth as Brad shifted uncomfortably beside her, the revelation chaining into Tom's subsequent stand from his table where he added with measured gravity, And let's not forget the loans from those proceeds that bailed out my real estate missteps, keeping Jake's life stable, but at the cost of Emily's dreams. A web of support that prioritized image over equity, his confession a twist that exposed the full entanglement of our shared pasts, from marital strains exacerbated by my absences to post-divorce alliances forged in secrecy, the rooms. Atmosphere now electric with the discomfort of truths laid bare in elegant succession rather than chaotic outburst, my revenge manifesting as this orchestrated unveiling that left no room for denial without self-incrimination. Clever in its reliance on documents and timing to dismantle the narrative brick by narrative brick. As the cake cutting commenced amid this charged hush, Lisa excused herself abruptly with Margaret in tow, their hurried whispers trailing toward a side exit while guests exchanged glances heavy with the weight of implications for family lore long sanitized in holiday retellings, and I remained seated, allowing the evening to wind down with dances that felt obligatory and farewells tinged with awkward embraces from those who now saw me anew. Tom's quiet approach afterward carrying a note of genuine admiration as he said, "You handled that with the poise of your best ops, Jake would be proud, and, honestly, so am I." His words a balm against the lingering ache of betrayals that extended beyond property to the erosion of trust in the people closest by blood and vow. Driving south through the Georgia night with stars pricking the sky like distant fireflies from childhood summers, Jake's sleepy voice on the speaker recounting his day at Tom's house grounded me in the immediacies beyond the wedding's fallout. Yet as the taillights faded in the rearview, ambiguities swirled unbidden. Would Lisa pursue legal counters over the plot's restitution, painting me as the villain in her social sphere, or might this exposure forge an unlikely path to reconciliation where Margaret finally acknowledged the imbalances that had shaped us, questions that hung unresolved like the humid air clinging to the windows, provoking reflections on whether my bold stand had liberated me from the shadows of favoritism or merely ignited a new cycle of familial discord that future gatherings would navigate with cautious steps, leaving the stories closed not in tidy resolution but in the thoughtful space between victory and its unforeseen echoes, where personal truths demand ongoing vigilance in the face of history's rewritten.